So, Plants vs. Zombies 3, a game that spent quite a lot of time in development with something to show for it. It's had something of an identity crisis for a few years now, and has currently left us with this odd mobile game mishmash of mechanics and ideas. Some of these work, and others are just baffling. For an incredibly brief summary of PvP3's history, there was a soft launch in February of 2020 with this weird vertical game. I never got the opportunity to play this. I didn't know it even existed, plus the world was on fire and everything. So I can't say much other than general impressions from other people. Copied a bit too much from Clash Royale among other issues, and that's all I'm going to say about that. That version got axed anyway in November after all the criticism, so we could eventually get these current launches, which is where we find ourselves at. I've played both of these recent versions, so as such I'll go over both of them. It'll be at the same time, since the differences are quite smaller. So at the core of the game, we do have what looks like fairly traditional PvZ gameplay. You start with Sunflower and Pea Shooter for the same tutorial that you see in the past two games, but this time the game encourages you to place your attackers at the back and your Sunflowers in front, which is pretty much the best strategy, and mandatory in most mods if you want to make any real progress. It's a fairly big deal considering PvZ1 never told you this, although to be fair, the game was easy enough that it was never an issue, and PvZ2 only had loading screen tips. Does that even count? To discuss these sun costs going from multiples of 25 to 1, there isn't really much to say. Yes, it doesn't seem like anybody asked, but other than simplifying the maths, that's about it. For the other sum-related point, the most recent beta changed up sun costs to pretty much match what they were before in past games, which does increase the difficulty a little bit, although I have a feeling this just happened due to complaints. But considering the general lack of difficulty present anyway, I do welcome it. Why is the difficulty practically non-existent for much of the 50 levels we have to play? It's been said by many other people, but I'm going to say it as well. The game just feels like one big tutorial. Here's the general layout for quite a lot of levels. Show a text box, have some pre-placed plants to show off whatever the text box says, then you get a level that lasts maybe a minute, another minute if the game's feeling generous. It gets tiring very quickly, and it doesn't help that the levels from the most recent beta are the exact same as the last, so I was just going through the same tutorials again, just to see what little else has been changed. There's 6 levels I can think of that are actually levels and are, well, interesting, and to give some credit, they can be quite challenging, kinda. Most of these levels do make good use of the area gimmicks that the game currently offers, at least, although said gimmicks aren't particularly inspired, borrowing from PvZ1's pool and roof whilst slightly mixing it up. It gives us water currents that change positions of plants and zombies, the roof slope mechanics from PvZ1, but it can go the other way, and lava showers that disable tiles, and instant delete anything on it, although the last one is a bit of a joke when these tiles never spawn if a plant is currently placed on that tile, so what's the point? New plants and zombies aren't much better either. Bamboo Shoot is just an alternative to Pea Shooter that does better with tanky zombies, but otherwise feel interchangeable, not like it matters when you can't choose your plants, more on that later. And Silver Sword is just a little confusing. Did PopCap really need to make the same plant for a third time in a row? Not that it's all that useful when Garlic and Sweet Potato don't exist to take advantage of its main gimmick. New zombies only show up around the roof levels, not counting Ducky Tubes, which are just faster in water, and otherwise not interesting. Bowling Zombie is just a generic projectile zombie, and Roller Imp relies entirely on the slope gimmick to do anything interesting. Now yes, this isn't going to be all that the game has to offer, as there are some screenshots that show some returning and new faces, but when at least part of your goal with the beta is to hype up the fanbase, at least, after everything that's happened with the last major beta, and Battle for Neighborville, I guess, I'm not talking about that right now, just sprinkling a few mediocre or uninspired gimmicks isn't going to help. This isn't going to be the last time I talk about the gameplay loop, but to carry on with that, I need to move on to the next section. So the initial layout of the previous beta was an immediate red flag for a lot of people, which did include me, for the very similar layout to the average mobile game, specifically of the Scapes variety, which in addition to fueling a whole lot of awful mobile game ads, all have you solve puzzles, that's important, with some decorating and dialogue thrown in. For this video, and nothing else, I did play Gardenscapes for about 3 minutes, and BlueStacks just broke. But honestly, that's fine, and the comparisons are there, even from that short amount of time, and it is painfully obvious. The cutscene, decoration, unlock system is the main point here, even just complete with the same general menu layout, and how you decide what you want for your garden. What was wrong with the old system, with Crazy Dave just popping up after a level? The dialogue in the cutscenes is fine, but not very memorable. There's some nice art, at least, but otherwise there's nothing else special about it. Mobile game comparisons don't end at a hub menu though. How levels are designed, and what else you have to work with other than sun, some optional and some forced. Let's start with something simple. Mow the lawnmower replaces the traditional 5 lawnmowers, the get out of jail free cuts, and can only take out 1 lane. Now hear me out here, considering how short these levels are, still not a fan about this, but that's not the point. Only having 1 lawnmower makes sense, as having the full 5 would just make these easy levels even easier. Now onto something a bit less simple, the lack of choose your seeds. This decision being made to purposefully restrict the plants you can use is related to the seemingly new direction for this game, a mobile puzzler. It's in the Play Store description and everything. You're given a level, puzzle, and you get given some plants, solution, and off you go. As of right now, what I personally see with this is that it sort of tries to make you forget just how little variety is currently in the game right now. There's barely any plants at all. But if this is a long-term approach, and let's be honest, it is, then I've got nothing, other than the puzzle game thing. The power-ups are rather self-explanatory. They take the Rake, Jalapeno, and Cherry Bomb and convert them to typical mobile game puzzle power-ups, alongside a Sun bonus and the new Chili Pepper. By the way, I never felt the need to use any of these, aside from the forced infinites, which I didn't have a choice in because those are applied automatically. Which, as of right now, looks like it's going to be the main way to make money to ensure that PopCat can actually exist, since they can no longer sell plants like PvZ2 if they wanted to carry on with this. Also, lives. Did they really need to be in the beta? It was generous enough with infinite life boosts, sure, and they're inevitable for this puzzle game direction, but it doesn't mean it can't be a bit miffed. Finally, for now, is the Grapes of Wrath, which for me is just really confusing in terms of execution. So after a point in the game, you unlock the plant food replacement, which was a mechanic that had strategy in how you used it. Unlike plant food, the grapes charge up over time, and then once charged up, it knocks back any zombie in the last tile or so, then fires a barrage of grapes, deals about as much damage as a bamboo shoot. The issue? There's no control over the grapes. It just happens when it happens. So a lot of potential difficulty and strategy is just evaporated when the grapes just leap into action and save your crumbling defense. There are actually a few times when things were getting a bit intense, having to work on the store line, dealing with multiple lanes, but then bam, the grapes just completely invalidate the entire thing, and it's not fun. The grapes may as well just be part of a scripted sequence, because right now it adds very little to the game aside from having waves that just mean nothing when the grapes kill them all anyway. If we must keep the grapes, please, make it an activated ability. It's not fun right now. I'm going to keep this short, as really this is just personal preference. The music is pretty good, even with there only being a few tracks here. The level themes definitely have some of PvZ1 and PvZ2's style in there, which I don't have a problem with, as both of those games are just bops, so those should be in the background at some point. The hub menu, whatever you want to call it, is pretty good as well. As far as sounds go, there's nothing as annoying as Iceweed, so that's all good. The art style, it's fine. The series has been consistent with shaking up art styles, both in main series and spin-offs, and I think the 3D, 2D blend here is pretty good, and my only real complaint is that weird zombie eating animation. So as for the actually new side content, we've got two main things to talk about here. I'll start with Vasebreaker, a minigame that was introduced in PvZ 1, made its way into PvZ 2 before just being abandoned after a few sets of levels, and then it was just completely butchered in this game. Now, I can't say I was ever a fan of Vasebreaker, but there was some legitimate strategy to it, so naturally PvZ 3 simplifies it down to a point where it's just painfully easy. Here's how to win every Vasebreaker level. Step 1, break all the vases to the right. Then the next lot, repeat until everything is broken. Step 2, symmetrical defense. Step 3, oh look, you won, congratulations. There's no challenge here at all if you just follow that process, and it made waiting for the daily Vasebreaker less and less exciting as it went on. There's also no cooldowns and plant placement, really pushing the speed of these levels, so if you want, you can still with lily pads in this one level, or just use squash to beat pretty much everything if you get it. This mode strongly enforces the puzzle focus the most, and it's made an already whatever mode quite a bit worse. I'm not going to pretend the original version was a masterpiece, but at least that needed brain power. As for the other part of this, there's this game's take on Arena, which thankfully has nothing to do with plant leveling. It's interesting that it doesn't have the best execution. Starting from level 13, there are 3 marked rows to the right, with each one granting you points if you defeat zombies in those rows. This honestly isn't a terrible idea, but there's 2 main issues here. For one, if you want to maximise your points, you have to force yourself into a very specific playstyle, relying on squashes, walnuts, bonk choys and silver swords, to avoid defeating zombies too early. This isn't exactly very fun for a while, and I'll be honest, I'm not sure why I forced myself into this, when I knew I wasn't ever going to use the rewarded power-ups anyway. I did get second though. The second issue, goes back to being unable to pick your plants, as sometimes the plants that you're given just don't work with the level layout, which is an issue as these 3 rows never change position. The only good thing I can think of to say about it is that it's optional and can be safely ignored. Now that we've gone through give or take everything about this, the question is, now what? PvZ 3's current direction has gone from what feels like mild concern to something that needs immediate attention. What I'd consider to be one of the main reasons that this attention is needed is not a unique take, but it is feedback. The first beta being scrapped appeared to show that yes, PopCap were listening, realised there were some major problems, and then went ahead and pretty much started from the ground up. Then people realised that nothing appeared to have been learnt from vertical PvZ 3, and we're still at the point of copying mechanics to morph it into a mobile game. Not like the second game, just something way beyond that. Then the feedback forms are just asking about things that really aren't that important. The first set of forms were fine, but vague. Then the next set was either asking about cosmetics or the same vague questions that aren't giving any good feedback. Then the more direct fan feedback, it might be doing something. We just don't know, since PopCap hasn't said all that much. All we really have to work with is a couple of screenshots promising a bit more content eventually. It's a waiting game that's already starting to get tiring, I suppose is the best way I can put it. Which is a shame, but right now there's just nothing anyone can do other than wait and hope that this game gets good. Which means nothing. I have some hope for PvZ 3, at least. That small kid in me just wishing for this to be great. But I'm just expecting disappointment. Well, that's everything about this game, for now at least. I know this is really late to the party by a good couple of months, but I'm not hugely bothered by that. I still managed to beat PopCap, who have still yet to provide any updates, at least when I'm recording this last section. Near the end of editing all this together. I'm not intending on this being a PvZ channel, although that could change, since there's plenty of other creators focused on the series anyway, and who are doing a better job at it than I can. I need to work on a lot of things, of course, mainly time management, which is more just me in general, the loud breathing, and the actual edits, although I haven't really decided on an editing software as of right now. I'm using Shotcut, which gets the job done, but I'm sure I could find an alternative that isn't just Adobe. There's no way I'm paying for that. This is technically a return, as I did make a couple of videos about 2 years ago, but those are currently unlisted. They're fine, but they exist as an introduction to something that never arrived. I'll be figuring this out as I go along, big surprise, and if you care about that at all, then stick around if you want. I won't ask this often, but if you want to like or maybe even subscribe, go ahead. Leave a comment if you feel like it, but no pressure. I don't know if I want to stick to this sort of style of video, that needs figuring out, but it's a start. Thanks for watching to the end then. Bye.